a bloody riot outside of an LA synagogue. The videos are crazy. Far leftists are very mad. Of course, they're mad. Many of these people are outright pro-Hamas. They're playing politics and lying to you when they say they're not pro-Hamas. That's a fact. I am not saying that every single liberal person concerned about Israel loves Hamas. I am saying that the far left extremists who are going outside and physically assaulting and attacking people, these people, when they claim they're not supporting Hamas, they're lying to you. But you know what? Many of them are outright willing to admit that they are. Oh, boy. I guess we had to get into the Israel-Palestine issue, but not so much. This is domestic. The first thing I want to say on this is what most people have said. Could you imagine if a bunch of Trump supporters showed up outside a black church or even a Hispanic church and engaged in this kind of behavior? The media would lose its mind. They're between a rock and a hard place now, I tell you what, because you've got these Democrats facing primary challenges, and they know they can't lean like this Bowman. Bowman's going hardcore, anti-Israel, anti-AIPAC, and all of these things. I am not saying he's outright wrong. I'm saying he's leaning into this to attract an activist voter base to save him in his primary. It's the direction they're going. So these people are in a difficult position where they're going to lose Jewish voters. They know it, and they need to make them up some way. But too many run-of-the-mill progressives who don't know too much are not going to side with Israel. Thus, Jewish Democrats are going to vote for more moderate or Republican politicians. And that's what really matters to me in this story. Not so much that we're getting another riot, but how this will impact the election. This, of course, it's going to make Jews in the United States who predominantly vote Democrat, they're going to vote Republican. Let's check this out from the Post-Millennial. On Sunday, a California synagogue was targeted during a violent pro-Palestinian demonstration that turned into a bloody riot. Rioters assaulted journalists, deployed chemical sprays, prevented Jews from entering their house of worship, and brutally beat multiple Israel supporters outside the synagogue. At least one was left bloodied, video footage shows. Violent clashes occurred outside the Adas Torah synagogue in Los Angeles around 1:40 p.m. Pro-Palestinian demonstrators surrounded the house of worship and called for a bloody revolution. Jews formed a line in front of the synagogue to protect it, and the LAPD was forced to deploy crowd control munitions to deter unruly ceasefire agitators, according to video footage. There's just a beautiful bit of irony in someone screaming ceasefire while mercilessly beating other people. But can't say I'm not surprised. Look. If you don't talk about foreign policy, Israel's military actions, Palestine, etc., the death of civilians, and what this conflict means and how it should be solved, that's tough, man. I don't got good answers for you. I can only tell you that the people in the United States do not represent either of those groups. It's the weirdest thing, okay? Some dude in LA who lives in LA and is Jewish and he's waving an Israeli flag is typically dictating military policy. The far left is screaming pro-Hamas stuff is not working with and dictating Hamas military strategy. It is so weird to me to see these people on the other side of the planet screaming and beating each other, representing their respective ideologies. Now, don't get me wrong. As it is to be expected, the Israel side, they're not typically the ones that go around smashing and beating people. And so here you have it. It's going to be the far leftists. Multiple brawls broke out between the groups as the pro-Palestinian mob prevented Jews from entering the synagogue. At least one pro-Israel supporter was beaten by the pro-Palestinian mob. He was pummeled to the ground outside the synagogue and was left bloodied, video footage shows. Now, apparently, even, I should pull this up because like even Joe Biden, let me see if I can find this story. Even Joe Biden, actually, do we have it right here, actually? Yes, LA Times. Biden, Bass, and Newsom blast abhorrent violence outside LA synagogue during protest. I think we have the, actually, I'll pull up the tweet so you can see his direct statement. They might have it in here. Here we go. The tweet from POTUS himself saying, "I'm appalled by the scenes outside the Adas synagogue in LA. Intimidating Jewish congregants is dangerous, unconscionable, anti-Semitic, and un-American. Americans have a right to peaceful protest, but blocking access to a house of worship and engaging in violence is never acceptable." I'd like to give a shout out to our good friend Andrew Cuomo in New York, who blocked people from worshiping during COVID, and many other Democrat governors who did much the same thing, to remind Joe Biden that the use of violence by police to stop people from entering their house of worship, yeah, that very much happened under your political party. And don't get me wrong, even after Biden got elected, we still saw this. Americans have a right to worship. Well, you got everybody involved now. The LA Times reporting a violent clash Sunday between pro-Palestinian demonstrators and supporters of Israel engaged outside the synagogue. We know this. The incident, in which there were shoving matches and punches thrown, resulted in one arrest. Now, I want to stress, this is far leftists showing up to a synagogue. Okay, you want to argue, yeah, well, the people with the Israeli flags, they were fighting too. It's like, but they're at a synagogue. Like, don't go to their church and try to fight with them. Take a look at this. They say no details were released on the individual, but the person, one person with a weapon who was arrested, is facing a misdemeanor charge in connection with carrying a spiked flag. Whatever that means. Put nails in it or something. There is no excuse for targeting a house of worship. Such anti-Semitic hatred has no place in California. Bass called the violence abhorrent, adding that blocking access to a place of worship is unacceptable. I want to be clear that LA will not be a harbor for anti-Semitism and violence. Those responsible for either will be found and held accountable, she said. President Biden also took issue with the protest tactics. Intimidating Jewish congregants is dangerous, unconscionable, anti-Semitic, and un-American. We did read this. Pro-Palestinian activists began gathering in front of the synagogue in Pico Boulevard. LA police officer Tony Im said they were quickly met with counter demonstrators, many of them carrying Israeli flags. Why are you going to a synagogue? Like, what are you doing? Well, look, I just gotta say, man, I think most of these activists purely anti-Semitic. They hate Jews. That's it. I am not saying, once again, I can already hear the America First people saying, like, Israel is doing this. Yeah, don't care. I'm talking about the far leftists, specifically who hate Jews, okay? I'm not talking about the liberals who are critical of Israel as they're allowed to be, or the America First groypers who are critical of Israel as they're allowed to be. And in fact, I think these people should be critical of Israel. I think we should all be critical, very much so, of Israel. They should not be getting our money. Long story, but it's a foreign policy question. I am saying there are far leftists in this country, and there are people on the right as well, who outright hate Jews, and that is why they are doing this. And they will use the mask of Middle Eastern conflict to cover up the fact that they just hate Jews. Jewish derangement syndrome. Don't get me wrong, there's also Israel derangement syndrome, because I'll give you my opinion on the foreign policy. No immediate reports of injuries, though there was a video showing someone seriously injured. Well, I shouldn't say seriously, but someone was injured because, serious implies like going to the hospital and stuff. Video appeared to show two pro-Palestinian demonstrators taken from an SUV and detained. Rabbi Herzl Ilunian told KCAL News the protest doesn't belong in front of a synagogue. I don't think the Jewish would go in front of a mosque, or the Christian people would go in front of a mosque to do such a thing. Funny, isn't it? I'm not going to blame Muslims. I'm not going to blame a person who is a Muslim. These people are bad people. There are people who claim to be Christian. They're bad people. I'm not going to blame Christians because bad people do bad things. I'm not going to blame Jews because bad people do bad things. I am not going to blame Jews because Israel is doing a thing these people don't like. So why go in front of a synagogue? Can't say I'm surprised, and I'm willing to bet most people are not surprised this is what they're doing. That being said, the people with Israeli flags are supporting a country, Israel. It is what it is. But I'll tell you this, as we wrap this one up. We'll have more on this probably tonight on IRL. The Israel derangement syndrome, as most of you know, really gets me. I'm really interested in anybody coming forward with maybe Saudi Arabia derangement syndrome, like maybe a little criticism for Saudi Arabia. I'll take that. The Saudis dictate U.S. policy to an extreme degree because they can dump oil and screw the dollar over. They just dumped the petrodollar. The agreement expired, and there's no plan for them to re-up, which means they're going to start trading now in foreign currencies, which will undermine U.S. petrodollar. The U.S. has been beholden to Saudi Arabia for too long, so much so that we are acting as their military in Yemen. It's nuts. Drone strikes, commando raids. Why? Because the Saudis could dump oil and they could screw over the U.S. economy. So these Saudi interests, they're deeply entrenched in the United States. I mean, take a look at the Saudis involved in 9/11. Oh, boy, yeah, that's right. There were lawsuits and that. And the funny thing is, you get these people claiming Israel did 9/11. I'm not kidding. Like, they're on Twitter saying this. And I'm like, dude, we know the Saudis were involved. Okay, I just got to do this. I'm doing this. We'll get one more minute of this. Come on. Come on, man. The Atlantic, new 9/11 evidence points to deep Saudi complicity. 2 decades of U.S. policy appear to be rooted in a mistaken understanding of... And let's do this. I'll do a lawsuit. Let's pull up the lawsuit. Let's see. Breaking down the 9/11 family's lawsuit focus on Saudi student who may have been a spy. Like, there's a lot going on here, okay? There's a lot. I'm not literally trying to come down on Saudi Arabia. I'm trying to make a point. The U.S. is beholden to many different countries on foreign policy, so pay attention to it. That being said, don't go in front of churches and mosques and synagogues and attack, but of course, it's just the far left. Next segment's coming up at 6 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.